Hello, good day. I'm going to discuss the literature under US colonialism in 1898 to 1945. Let me just give you a short review about this topic, okay? So the Philippines won against the Spaniards who colonized us for more than 300 years. Our flag was hoisted on June 12, 1898 as a symbol of our independence. General Emilio Aguinaldo was elected as the first president of the Philippine Republic, but this was short-lived. The Filipino-American was resulted in the defeat of General Miguel Malvar in 1903. The peace movement started as early as 1900. Many Filipinos started writing again, and the nationalism of the people remained undaunted. The Philippine literacy production during the American period in the Philippines was spurred by two significant developments in education and culture. First, introduction of free public instruction for all children of school age. Second, the use of English as a medium. It was male-dominated society during US colonialism. Female voices in literature were not taken seriously by the general public. There are three types of writers during the US regime. The first one is Spaniard or Spanish writers, which write about the nationalism. Second, Tagalog writers, which write about their lamentations on the country's condition and their attempts to arouse their fellow men's love for country. The last one is English writers, which imitated the themes and methods of the Americans. So let's proceed to the three frames of Philippine literature in English. The first one is the period of reorientation, 1898 to 1910. The expression of reorientation appeared during this period. English as artistic vehicle accompanied the American occupation in August 13, 1898, and as is commonly said, a decision offered on us by history. In 1900, English came to be utilized as a mechanism of guidance in the government-funded school. The second one is the period of imitation, year 1910 to 1925. By 1919, the UP College Folio distributed the scholarly organizations of the main Filipino journalists in English. They were the pioneers in short story composing. They were then grabbing their way into impersonating American and British models, which brought about a stilted, artificial, and unnatural style, lacking essentialness and spontaneity. The last one is the period of self-discovery, year 1925 to 1941. At this point, Filipino scholars had obtained the dominance of English composition. They now unquestionably and ably compose on a tone of subjects, in spite of the fact that the bygone era topics of attention and youth endured. They went into all types of composing like the novel and the drama.
Jose Corazon de Jesus, or also known as Suseng Batute. He was born on 1896 and died in 1932. Jose Cecilio Corazon de Jesus was born on November 22, 1896. He is also known by his pen name, Suseng Batute. Was a Filipino poet who used Tagalog poetry to express the Filipinos' desire for independence during the American occupation of the Philippines, a period that lasted from 1901 to 1946. He is best known for being the lyricist of the Filipino song Bayan Ko. De Jesus spent his childhood in Santa Maria, Bulacan, his father's hometown. He completed his education at the Liceo de Manila, where he graduated in 1916. De Jesus was acclaimed winner of the showdown and was dubbed Hari ng Balagtasan, or King of Versified Debate. He held the title until his death in 1932. De Jesus contracted an ulcer during the filming of Oriental Blood and died of ulcer complications on May 28, 1932. He was also a journalist for the revolutionary newspapers Independence, the Brotherhood, the Union, Renaissance, and Democracy. And also, he received his Bachelor of Law degree in 1920. These are some selected works of Joseng Batute. Ang Manok Kumbulik or White Roasters, 1911, meaning a poem about a countryman's misfortune in cockfighting. Barong Tagalog, 1921. Poem written after the Filipino national costume. Ang Pagbabalik, Homecoming, 1924. Ang Pamana, The Legacy, 1925. Isang Punong Kahoy, A Tree, 1932. Next is, some of his poems were set into music. Bayan Ko, My Country, 19... Next is, some of his poems were set into music. Bayan Ko, My Country, 1929. Music by Constancio de Guzman. Pakiusap. A Requests. Music by Francisco Santiago. Kung gusto nyo po marinig yung music is nasa baba po yung link. Cecilio Apostol, or also known his pen name, Catulo. He was born on 1877 and died in 1938. Cecilio Apostol. He was born on November 22, 1877. Was a Filipino poet and poet laureate. His poems were once used to teach the Spanish language under the Republic Act No. 1881. He was born in Santa Cruz, Manila and studied at the Ateneo de Manila, where he finished his Bachelor of Arts before studying law at the University of Santo Tomas. During the early years of American occupation, he worked as a journalist for the revolutionary newspapers Independence, Brotherhood, Renaissance, and Democracy. Kung mapapansin nyo, halos parehas sila ni Joseng Batute. He later joined the Nacionalista Party, which wanted the independence of the Philippines from the United States. He died in Caloocan City. Next is poem works by Cecilio Apostol. Al Heroe Nacional, to the national hero, which is dedicated to Jose Rizal. Next is Pentelikas. He described landscapes evoking a vivid image. Next writer is Magdalena Gonzaga Halandoni. She was born on 1891 and died in 1978. Magdalena Gonzaga Halandon. She was born on May 27, 1891 in Haro, Iloilo. She was a Filipino feminist writer. She is now remembered as one of the most prolific Filipino writers in the Hiligaynon language. Halandoni only wrote for publication purposes due to the male-dominated society at the time. Back then, female voices in the literature were not taken seriously by the general public. Her famous poem, Ang Gitara, in English, The Guitar, is read in classroom all over the country today. She has been displayed from her hometown twice and has survived the Philippine Revolution, the Filipino-American War, and the Japanese occupation. In 1977, she received the prestigious Republic Cultural Heritage Award for her literary achievements from the government. About 1 year before her death, she died on September 14, 1978, at the age of 87. Other famous works of Magdalena Halandoni. Annabella, sa kapaang inaway in the heat of war. Ang dalaga sa tindahan, the young woman in the store. Ang kahapon ng Panay, the past of Panay. Marcel Navarra. He was born on 1914 and died 1984. Marcelino M. Navarra. He was born on June 2, 1914. A Filipino, Visayan editor, poet, and writer from Cebu, Philippines. He was regarded as the father of modern Cebuano short story. He wrote poetry and over 80 short stories before and after World War II, from 1930 until 1953, with the pseudonym Marcel Navarra. Navarra is best known for the short story Ugiano Dako, meaning, and I was carried away, that won first prize in literary contest by Bisaya Magazine in 1937. He edited several Cebuano periodicals. He was the editor of Lamdag, Light in 1947, associate editor of Bulak, meaning flower, in 1948, literary section editor of Republic Daily from 1948 until 1952, and editor of Bagong Suga, meaning New Light, from 1963 to 1967. From 1938 to 1941, he was the literary editor of Bisaya Magazine before his appointment as its editor-in-chief from 1969 until his retirement in 1973. He retired on December 1973 and died on March 28, 1984. Next is short stories works by Marcelino Navarra. Iyang Kitara, Panimalus, Sulat nga binuksan, Tawo sa ilawom sa sotana. Next is poetry works by Marcelino Navarra. First is Coloriana, Kaadlawon, Kanimo Pressing, Mga Tapos na, Naghulat, Nagsilag, Pagbuot sa Langit.
Hi, good afternoon everyone. I'm Leila A. Peralta and I'm going to discuss some writers who produced significant works of literature during American period. Here's the first writer. This is Theogracias A. Rosario. He was born October 17, 1894 in Tondo, Manila. He died November 26, 1936 at the age of 43. He was known as a Filipino writer, reporter, and a poet. Kinilala rin siya bilang father of Tagalog short story. Usually, kapag nagsusulat siya, ginagamit niyang pen name is yung Rex, Delio, Dante A. Rossetti, Delpin Rojas, Dar, Angelus Dario, and Rosalino. Rosario began his career in writing at the age of 13. He worked for Ang Mithi, which is one of the country's pioneering publication. He's an active in the field of journalism. In the year 1912, he became a member of Pahayagang Demokrasya. In 1914, he also became part of satiricong magazine known as Bunto Pagi. In 1917, became a reporter of Taliba and eventually became an editor. He also writes sa Pagkakaisa ng Bayan and in Photo News na tinatawag ngayong Liwayway. Rosario is a member of different organizations. Some organizations are Kalipunan ng Kwentista, Aklatang Bayan, Katipunan ng mga Dalubhasa, and Akademya ng Wikang Tagalog. He served also as the president of Ang Ilaw at Panitik. Yung kathanyang Ipaghiganti ang Puso is considered as the first short story in Tagalog. Other story na ginawa niya is yung Aloha, Greta Garbo, Ako'y Mayroong Ibon. Next is Aurelio Tolentino y Valenzuela. Aurelio Tolentino was born October 15, 1869 at Guagua, Pampanga. He died July 5, 1915 at the age of 47. Tolentino is a Filipino playwright, poet, journalist, and a revolutionary. He took Bachelor of Arts at San Juan de Lectoran and Law at University of Santo Tomas. His work at the turn of 20th century depicted his desire to see Philippine independence from its colonizer. He was arrested twice, first by Spaniard and later by American forces. He wrote and directed the anti-imperialist play entitled Kahapon, Ngayon at Bukas. It led him to his arrest in 1903. Nakulong siya. Si Tolentino din is an early member of Katipunan. He was arrested shortly after the start of war. He was detained for 9 months. Though nakulong siya, he continued to support the cause for Philippine sovereignty. And he is one of the signatories of Declaration of Independence in Kawit, Cavite in 1898. He is the founder of Samahang Hanapbuhay ng Mahihirap, which is the first cooperative in the Philippines. And also, he founded the El Parnaso Filipino, which is a school for promotion of Tagalog literature. And the last writer for my research is Manuel Estabilia Argilia. So, si Argilia was born on June 17, 1911 in Narbecan, Bawang, La Union. He died August 30, 1944 at the age of 33. So, si Argilia is a known Ilocano writer in English. Lalo na sa sinulat niyang anthologized short story of How My Brother Leon Brought Home a Wife. That story won first prize in the Commonwealth Literary Contest in 1940. Susie Argilla took Bachelor of Science in Education at University of Philippines. While he's studying, he became president of UP's Writers Club and an editor of University's Literary. So addition lang, si Argilla, mostly yung mga sinusulat niya, pinapakita yung scene sa baryo na Rebcan, Bawang La Union, where he was born. His bond with his birthplace forged by his dealing with the peasant folks of Ilocos. It remained strong even after he moved to Manila. Tapos merong nag-describe sa kanya, si F. Shunil Jose, famous writer din siya. Dinescribe niya si Argilla na a man with a black patch on his cheek, which is a birthmark. Si Argilla became a creative writing teacher at University of Manila. He worked at Bureau of Public Welfare as managing editor until 1943. Afterward, he was appointed to the Board of Censor. He also secretly organized guerrilla intelligence unit which is against the Japanese during World War II. This organization na binuo nila leads him to death. On August 1944, he was captured and executed by Japanese army at Fort William McKinley, now known as Fort Bonifacio, along with other guerrilla leader and 10 more men. That's all.
So good evening guys. My report is all about writers of Philippine literature. It consists of 4 writers. Let's start from Wilfredo Maria Guerrero. She is a Filipino playwright, director, teacher, and a theater artist. Guerrero wrote well over 100 plays, 41 of which have been published. His unpublished plays have either been broadcast over the radio or stage in various parts of the Philippines. So, before that, I would like to introduce the profile of Wilfredo Maria Guerrero. Guerrero worked as a reporter and operator for La Vanguardia, a Spanish newspaper, and as a drama critic for the Manila Tribune. He also worked for some time in the Philippine film industry as a scriptwriter. And also, he served as the director of the Filipino Players from 1941 to 1947. In 1947, he was appointed as a director of the Dramatic Club at the University of the Philippines, despite not having a degree, and he held that position for 16 years. It was Guerrero's favorite aunt, Maria Araceli, who discovered his writing ability. When he was 12 or 13, she noticed him writing on scraps of paper, then hiding them inside his cabinet drawer. And also, after his aunt's death, Guerrero wrote some of his popular comedies, Movie Artist, Basketball Fight, and Wanted, a chaperone. He also made her the base for the principal characters in Forever, Maria Teresa, and Frustrations, Maria Araceli. Both women are like my aunt, imperious, strong-willed, wise, but also human. He wrote, no, okay, pause natin. And also, Guerrero received 3 national awards, the Rizal Pro Patria Award in 1961, the Araw ng Maynila Award in 1969, and the Republic Cultural Heritage Award in 1972. The UP Mobile Theater received 2 awards when he was director, the Citizens Council for Mass Media Trophy in 1966 and the Balagtas Award in 1969. In 1997, Guerrero was posthumously distinguished as a national artist for the Philippine theater. So, that's all about Gardeo Patraciano. Next, mali. Wilfredo Maria Guerrero, I'm sorry. Next is Gardeo Patraciano. Gardeo Patraciano was a Filipino Visayan dentist, teacher, and a fiction author known for her novel, regarded as the first feminist novel written in the Cebuano language. Kiano was born in Alcantara, Philippines on April 27, 1918. She was the eldest of the 9 children of Aglipayan Bishop and Cebuano writer Juan Quijano and Segundina Gador, and attended schools in Cebu, Lanao, and Oroquieta in Misamis Occidental. Former Misamis Occidental Governor Gideon Quijano was her brother. She became a college teacher and a dentist, whereby people call her the nickname Doctor or Doc Garding. And also, she remained unmarried. Furthermore, Quijano was the first feminist fictionist in Cebu literature and one of the pre-war short story writers. She had written 2 novels and over 150 stories and wrote for periodicals The Freeman, Nasod, and Bag-ong Kusog, and the other publications before and after World War II. Probably, feminist themes were prevalent in her writings on women's concern and domestic problems, advocating for education for women during the time when many girls did not go to school. Next is Lope K. Santos. Lope K. Santos was born in 1879 to 1963. He is a Filipino Tagalog language writer and a former senator of the Philippines. He was also known as Ama ng Balirala ng Pilipinas. Lope K. Santos was born in Pasig Province of Manila as Lope Santos Canseco to Ladislao Santos, a native of Pasig, and Victorina Canseco, a native of San Mateo on September 25, 1879. His father was imprisoned during the Philippine Revolution because Spanish authorities found copies of Jose Rizal's No Limit Tangere and Kalayaan in his possession. Furthermore, to Lope K. Santos' story, Santos was sent to Escuela Normal Superior de Maestros for education and finished schooling at Colegio Filipino. During Philippine Revolution of 1896, Santos joined revolutionaries. By the time of the death of his mother, she requested Lope to marry Simeona Salazar. Marriage happened on February 10, 1900, and they were blessed with 3 children, namely Lacambini and Macaaraw. He pursued law at the Academia de la Jurisprudencia at Escuela Derecho de Manila, where he receives a Bachelor of Arts in degree in 1912. In 1903, Santos started publishing fragments of his first novel, Banaag at Sikat, on his weekly labor magazine, Muling Pagsilang, and was completed in 1906. When published in book form, Santos Banaag at Sikat was considered as the first socialist-oriented book in the Philippines, which expounded principles of socialism and seek labor reforms from the government. So, the last writer will be Pedro Gatmaitan. Oh, I I couldn't get any English English. I couldn't get English explanation of who is Pedro Gatmaitan. So, this is the Filipino version. Si Pedro Gatmaitan ay tinuturing na pinakamagaling na makata ng mga tulang liriko. Ang hindi makakalimutan katipunan ng kanyang mga tula na inaiambag noong 1912 ay ang Tungkos ng Alaala. Siya ang unang nakasulat ng tulang pasalaysay na kasal. Oh. Ang pagiging makata ni Gatmaitan ay minana niya sa kanyang ama na isang makatang taga-Bulacan. Sa kanyang ama niya natutuhan ang tungkol sa berso. Ang mga tula niya ay higit na malalim ang diwa at papilosopiya. Siya rin ang unang gumamit ng lalabing animin at lalabing waluhing pantig sa panuluan. Bukod sa pagiging magaling na makata, naging mamahayag, reporter at editor din si Gatmaitan ng babasahing alitap-tap. In addition, he also wrote Bayaning Plaradel by Pedro Gatmaitan of Bulacan in 1913 in honor of Bulaqueño hero Marcelo H. Del Pilar. So, thank you, ma'am. That's all.
Other Filipino writers and their significant works of literature during the American period. We have Carlos Busolan, born on November 24, 1913 and died on September 11, 1956. He is from Binalonan, Pangasinan, Philippine Island. He was a novelist, essayist, and a labor union organizer. He was an English-Filipino novelist and poet who spent most of his times in United States. There are some controversies surrounding the accuracy of events recorded within America is in the heart. He is celebrated for giving a post-colonial Asian immigrant perspective to the labor movement in America and for telling the experience of Filipinos in US during the 1930s and 40s. In the 1970s, he was resurgence in Asia-Pacific Islander America activism. His unpublished writings were discovered in a library in the University of Washington, leading to posthumous release of several unfinished works and anthologies of his poetry. His novels include The Laughter of Life of My Father, which was originally published as The Short Sketches, and posthumously published The Cry and the Deduction, which detailed the Hukbalahap Rebellion in the Philippines. Other works of Carlos Busolan is The Cry and the Dedication, The Father's Strategy, The Romance of Magno Rubio, and If You Want to Know What We Are, and the last one is My Father Goes to Court. But his best known work today is the semi-autobiographical America is in the Heart, but his first gained fame for his 1943 essay is on the Freedom from Want, which is from March 06, 1943. The second to the last is Benigno Ramos. Benigno Ramos, or Benigno Ben Ruben, his pen name, Benigno Ben Ruben Ramos y Pantaleon, born on February 10, 1892. He is from Bulacan, Bulacan, from Philippines, and known as Balagtasan Poem. He is a founder of Philippine Sakdalista movement and writer of a poetry with a collection, Mga Agam-Agam at iba pang tula. The Philippine Sakdalista movement was founded by the writer Benigno Ramos in 1930. The name of the movement is derived from the Tagalog word sakdal, which means to accuse, and a nod to the J'accuse editorial of the French novelist Émile Zola. The movement's platform was centered upon immediate independence, state redistribution, taxation reduction, and greater governmental transparency. The movement lasted until 1935 when the Sandinista leaders organized an active uprising that quickly failed, causing the party to dissolve. The movement The movement is estimated to had 20,000 formal members that influenced hundreds of thousands of Filipinos in the early 1930s. Aside from his political activism, Ramos was also noted as a writer of poetry with a collection of mga agam-agam at iba pang tula due for publication. The last one is Faustino Aguilar. He born on February 15, 1882 and died on July 24, 1955 from Malate, Manila. And Faustino Aguilar is a pioneering Filipino novelist, journalist, revolutionary, a union leader, and editor. Faustino is one of the first novelists in the Philippines to explore and present social realism through literature. Faustino Aguilar was a Filipino novelist and an editor of Taliba. He wrote novels in social realism vein, a novel that gives a penetrating analysis of Philippine society at the beginning of American rule, and with the themes of ruthlessness and injustice in society. Aside from that, Aguilar also became a Katipunan member when he was only 14 years old. Aguilar worked as a civil servant before. Aguilar worked in different branches of the Philippine government. One particular office is the Department of Labor. Here are some of Faustino Aguilar's work: The Busabos ng Palad, Pinaglahuan, at Sa Ngalan ng Diyos. Other significant works of Mr. Faustino Aguilar: Ang Lihim ng Isang Pulo or The Secret of an Island in 1926, Ang Patawad ng Patay, The Pardon of the Dead in 1955, Ang Kaligtasan or The Salvation in 1951, Pinaglahuan, Place of Disappearance in 1906, published in 1907. That's all. Thank you.
Literature under US Colonialism. Benigno Ben Ruben Ramos y Pantaleon was born on February 10, 1892, and he disappeared on 1946. Accounts differ on what happened to Ramos after the fall of the Second Philippine Republic. Some claim that he was killed in an airplane crash in Baguio, along with the retreating Japanese. He's a Filipino author, writer, organization founder, politician, and an advocate for the independence of the Philippines from the United States. He set up a Tagalog language newspaper. That Tagalog language newspaper was called Saktal, which gained a wide circulation in rural areas. Aside from his political activism, Ramos was also noted as writer of poetry with the collection Mga Agam-Agam at Iba Pang Tula due for publication. He wrote the poem titled Panulat in 1930s. Some of his poems were politically purposive, as these made his poems easily accessible to the masses in whose service he had placed his art. His modernism is both aesthetic and political. Ramos' literary cred is embodied in his famous poem Panulat, whose tropes speak of the role of literature
in the struggle for national emancipation and social justice. Masasalamin ng mga kontradiksyong mapagpahiwatig ng mga pangyayaring naitala sa tulang panulat. Mapanganib ang literatura bilang sandatang magagamit ni numan para sa kagalingan ng lipunan o kapahamakan nito. Nasa konkretong sirkumstansya ang determinasyon ng halaga ng anumang likhang sining. Jose Cecilio Corazon de Jesus was born on November 22, 1896 at Santa Cruz, Manila, and he died on May 26, 1932 at Santa Maria, Bulacan. He is also known by his pen name Huseng Batute. He was a Filipino poet who used Tagalog poetry to express the Filipinos' desire for independence during the American occupation of the Philippines. He is best known for being the lyricist of the Filipino song Ang Bayan Ko. Jose Corazon de Jesus wrote this poem called Ang Pagpapalik. Ang tulang ito ay tungkol sa isang mag-asawa na kinailangan pansamantalang maghiwalay upang ang lalaki ay magtrabaho sa malayang lugar bilang isang magsasaka. Sa kanyang paglisan ay naiwan ang kanyang asawang babae na tila hindi kinaya ang labis na lungkot ng kanilang pagkakawalay. Sa pagbabalik ng lalaki ay nadatnan niya ang kanyang minamahal na nakahimlay. Ang kanyang pagbabalik ay siya naman niyang paglisan ng kanyang minamahal. Mapapansin na may simbolismo sa tulang ito. Ang panyong puti bilang masayang nagpapaalam habang umiiyak, ibong itim na masamang pangitain at may masamang mangyayari, at ang kandila na may patay o may lamay.
Poem interpretation of To the National Hero by Cecilio Apostol, translated by Alfredo S. Veloso. In the first stanza, Apostol showed how much he honored Rizal because even though Rizal lived and studied in Spain, he still came back to the Philippines, his motherland, to fight for independence against the Spaniards. He also emphasized that all the sacrifices and great contributions of Rizal will forever be engraved in the memory of his fellow countrymen. The second stanza commemorates the day when Rizal was shot in Bagumbayan and dies for the country in the hands of the Spaniards. That very day, the hearts and minds of the Filipinos were awakened and the patriotism arose in everyone's hearts. Rizal is a great contributor to the victory of attaining the freedom of the Filipino people. He pointed out that the lives of the Filipinos today is unimaginable if Rizal did not expose all the wrongdoings of the Spaniard, and we can say that until now we are slaves of Spain. The third and the fourth stanzas were honoring Rizal for inspiring all the heroes who gave their lives for the country to get freedom, because before him, Filipinos were not able to fight for themselves. A life in the hands of the Spaniards was like living in a hell because they neither have power nor rights. The last stanza illustrates that during the uncertainty of winning the battle, carrying the words of Rizal was the most important tool our heroes used to achieve their goal, and that is the independence in the hands of the Spaniards.
Kay Rizal, tula ni Cecilio Apostol. Bago ako mag-umpisa, ako nga po pala si Joshua Mina sa pangatlo. Bayaning walang kamatayan, kadakilaang maalamat. Sumungaw ka mula sa bangin ng libingan na kinahihimbingan mo sa maluwalhating pangarap. Halika, ang pag-ibig namin pinapagliyab ng inyong alaala. Mula sa madilim na walang wakas ay tumatawag sa iyo upang putungan ng mga bulaklak ang iyong gunita. Matulog kang payapa sa lilim ng kabilang buhay. Tagapagligtas ng isang bayang inalipin, wag iluha. Sa iwaga ng libingan, ang sandaling tagumpay ng Kastila. Pagkat kung pinasabog man ang utak mo ng isang punglo, ang diwa mo na may gumiba ng isang imperyo. Luwalhati kay Rizal, ang halan niyang kabanalan, na parang sunog sa taboron sa pinag-aapoy sa talino ng batas ay ilaw ng kaisipan, sa marmol ay buhay, at sa kodyapi kundiman. Ang tulang kay Rizal ni Cecilio Apostol ay ang tula na nagsasaad ng kanyang kadakilaan at ang kanyang ginawa na tunay na naging alamat. Siya man ay namatay, ang kanyang alaala ay nananatiling buhay para sa ating mga Pilipino. Siya ay hindi lang nag-iwan ng isang magandang kasaysayan. Siya din ay nag-iwan ng mga magagandang tula, kasabihan, nobela at iba pang mga talagang panulat na nagbigay ng magagandang ideya. At marami ring kaalaman para sa ating lahat, na siya ang nagpapatunay na ang edukasyon ay tunay na dapat nating pagyamanin. Kaya't ang bawat Pilipino ay patuloy siyang dadakilain bilang pagbibigay pugay sa kanyang buhay na inalay. Yun lamang po at maraming salamat.
Poetry during US colonization. The noteworthy names in the field of poetry wrote in free verse, in odes and sonnets, and in other types. Poetry was original, spontaneous, competently written, and later incorporated social consciousness. Their writings clearly depicted their love of country and their longing for independence. Poetry in all languages continued to flourish in all regions of the country during the American period. The Tagalogs, hailing Francisco F. Balagtas as the nation's foremost poet, invented the Balagtasan in his honor. The Balagtasan is a debate in verse, a poetical just done almost spontaneously between protagonists who debate over the pros and cons of an issue. The first Balagtasan was held in March 1924 at the Instituto de Mujeres with Jose Corazon de Jesus and Florentino Colantes as rivals. It was during this balagtasan that Jose Corazon de Jesus, known as Joseng Batute, emerged triumphant to become the first king of the balagtasan. Jose Corazon de Jesus was the finest master of the genre. He was later followed by balagtasistas Emilio Mar Antonio and Crescencio Marquez, who also became king of the balagtasan in their own time. As Joseng Batute de Jesus also produced the finest poems and lyrics during the period, his debates with Amado V. Hernandez on the political issue of independence from America and nationhood were mostly done in verse and are testament to the vitality of Tagalog poetry during the era. Lope K. Santos' epic poem, Ang Panggigera, is also proof of how poets at the period have come to master the language to be able to translate it into effective poetry. The balagtasan would be echoed as a poetical fiesta and would be duplicated in the Ilocos as the Bukaneg in honor to Pedro Bukaneg, the supposed transcriber of the epic Biyag, William Ang, and the Crisotan in Pampanga in honor to esteemed poet of the Pampango Juan Crisostomo Soto. In 1932, Alejandro G. Abadilla, armed with a new criticism and an orientation on modernist poetry, would taunt traditional Tagalog poetics with the publication of his poem, Ako ang Daigdig. Abadilla's poetry began the era of modernism in Tagalog poetry, a departure from the traditional rhymed, measured, and orally recited poems. Modernist poetry, which utilized free or blank phrases, was intended more for silent reading than oral delivery. Like the writers in English who formed themselves into organizations, Tagalog writers also formed the Ilaw at Panitik and held discussions and workshops on the value of literature in society. Benigno Ramos was one of the most politicized poets of the period as he aligned himself with the peasants of the Sakdal movement.
So, good afternoon everyone. I'm Mel Grace Birosendes and I'm going to report the short stories. So, short stories is a word of fiction that involves the imagination of the reader. It tells about the single event or experience of one story. It can be read in just one sitting, meaning it has a limited 5,000 to 20,000 words in every story. It also has a limited set of characters, a single setting, and a simple plot. So there are different elements of short stories. Number one is setting. It talks about the location where the story takes place, including the season, weather, time of day, year, exact location. Character talks about the personality of the characters. Either it is a protagonist or antagonist. It is also how the reader imagines the certain character in a story. Plot is a sequence or series of events through which the writer reveals what is going to happen in a story. Conflict, it is a problem in the story that needs to be resolved. Climax is when the action comes to the highest point of conflict. Ito yung pinaka-intense, exciting na part sa isang story. Next is resolution. It is the story's action after the climax. Or ito na yung conclusion of the story. Next is the theme, where it is a main or recurrent idea. It is also the story's main ideas, the moral lesson or the message na gusto iparating na author telling his or her stories. So, under US Colonialism, Dead Stars, ito yung kinilalang first Filipino short stories written in English by Marquez in the year 1925. So, it was represented as a landmark moment in Philippine literature where it was no longer entirely imitative of American short stories, meaning hindi na siya ginaya or binase sa mga American short stories. Although noong mga year na yon may mga early Filipino fictionist din na gumagawa ng mga short stories, Dead Stars was the first story that gained the respect and adulation of both Filipinos and Americans. So, Dead Stars is a short story about forbidden love when Alfredo Salazar, who was about to get married to his fiancée Esperanza, his love and passion for his fiancée started getting faint as he was attracted to another woman named Julia Salas. As Alfredo knew that his family will disapprove his desire of having another woman, he unwantedly married with Esperanza and started his own family. Later, after 8 years, Alfredo went on a business trip to Julia's place. In his visit to Julia, to his surprise, he recognized that he no more felt attracted to her anymore. He compared his love for her as dead stars, his memory of a long way to get the girl he thought he loved.
Zarzuela is a Spanish lyric dramatic genre that alternates between spoken and song sing, the latter incorporating operatic and popular song as well as dance. Containing from 1 to 5 acts, portraying the fancies of sentimental love among idealized Filipino characters and regularly joining contemporary social, political, financial, or social issues for significance and interest. Zarzuela during American colonial period was characterized by nationalism, the belief that countries will profit by acting autonomously rather than collectively,
accentuating public as opposed to worldwide objectives. Freedom of speech, the opportunity of individual or a society to verbalize their feelings and thoughts unafraid of counter, oversight, or lawful acts, asset. Experience desire for freedom. Driven by conviction, you're wanting opportunity to control and choose when and how things occur. Driven by assortment, you need opportunity to encounter new things frequently. Driven by essentialness, you want opportunity from judgment and an open environment where you feel recognized regularly and that you matter. Love of country. Patriotism or love of country is the inclination of adoration, commitment, and feeling of connection to a country and collusion with different people or community who share similar opinion. Fight against colonialism and imperialism. Example of Zarzuela during American colonial period, Walang Sugat by Severino Reyes, meaning no wound or unwounded, an 1898 Tagalog language Zarzuela. Anak ng Dagat by Patricio Mariano, Child of the Sea.
Magandang araw po sa inyong lahat. I'm Obinyata Rakilin and I'm going to report about kinds of literary forms. My assigned topic is only novel. So now let's define novel. So novel is a genre of fiction, and a fiction may be defined as the art of contriving through the written word representation of human life that instruct or divert or both. Novel, an invented prose narrative of considerable length and of certain complexity that deals imaginatively with human experience, usually through a connected sequence of events involving a group of persons in a specific setting. So, ang nobela po ay hindi totoong pangyayari. Ito ay opinion lamang ng mga manunulat. These are the examples, novels, and the authors under US Colonialism. So first is Faustino Aguilar. Faustino Aguilar was one of the first novelists in Philippines to explore and present social realism through. Aguilar was a member of Katipunan. He was known during the American colonization period in Philippines as a journalist and editor of Taliba. He authored the books entitled Pinaglahuan, or Life Ever Bitter, means the point or the place where someone or something disappeared, or fading point. Most of his novels talk about violence and injustice in the society during his time. Pinaglahuan was written during the American period in Philippine history on 1898 to 1946. His novel revolves around the rich girl, Dandling, whose love for a factory clerk had to give way to her parents' wish to marry her off to the business magnate, Rojalde, who would organize her in the American firm where he works. Next is Lupe K. Santos. Santos, born on September 27, 1879, and known as Ama ng Baliralang Filipino or Father of Grammar. He is best known for his 1906 socialist novel, Banaag at Sikat, and to his contribution for the development of Filipino grammar and Tagalog orthography. The first chapters of Lope's novel Banaag at Sikat, which expounded on socialistic principles and called for labor reforms from the government's end, came out in 1903 in the weekly labor magazine, Muling Pagsilang, which he also published. Last one is Marcel M. Navarra. His novel entitled And I Was Carried Away. Navarra is known as the father of modern Cebuano literature. He was born in Tuyum, Karkar. He spent most of his life writing almost 18 short stories, which were published in Cebuano magazines.
namely Bisaya, Alimyon, and Bulag. His first story tungod sa kayagang was published in Nasod in 1933. Marcel Navarra also became editor of two of the most popular Cebuano magazine, Bisaya and Bagong Suga. Marcel Navarra stopped writing after he wrote his last work entitled Si Zozimo in 1955. His best-known story was O Gianod Ako o sa Tagalog At Ako'y Inanod, a Bisaya Prize winner.